monitor the chat for you. And then once Patty's done presenting, we will ask Patty those questions then. All right, Lori, back to you.
All right, thank you. And again, welcome everybody. And Patty, thank you so much for being here and taking time from your busy workday to present for Mental Health Monday. Patty moved to Cottonwood in 1995. She began her work here at the Verde Valley Guidance Clinic, which is now Spectrum Healthcare. She has a BA in art education and an MA in counseling psychology. She has 27 years of recovery from alcohol use. Patty developed and opened the Women's World program for the Verde Valley Guidance Clinic, which is now Spectrum, and that opened back in 2007. She was the first manager when that first happened. She's worked in the mental health addiction field since 1989. Patty was one of the first mental health first aid teachers in Arizona, starting to teach that course in 2010. She continues to research, learn, and develop ways to support people who cope with addiction and mental health issues without stigma or judgment. Her passion is helping others understand the complexities of addiction. And Patty is currently the clinical director for recovery steps to recovery homes. Did I get it right, Patty?
You got it.
Kind of stumbled over there. And if I missed anything, fill it in for me. And thank you.
So am I on?
You're on.
All right. All right. Thank you very much, Lori, for that great introduction. I really appreciate it. The only thing that we missed is I broke my wrist. I may be doing a little shifting around here. And I came here, as Lori said, in 1995 from Pennsylvania and never slipped on the ice back there and did it here in Arizona. So those are the kind of things they have to deal with. Lori warned me or helped me or gave me the opportunity to breathe by telling me that you're a group of professionals, but you're very laid back. So that made me relax and feel comfortable that I don't have to be a perfect presenter today. I also asked Lori, what are some things that might be important to add to my discussion? And she did mention that it would not be a bad idea to start out with a little bit about alcoholism as a disease. And I'm also going to ask you to, if I need to move faster, please let me know so I don't spend all my time and we miss all the questions. Okay. So is alcohol use a disease? Well, it's kind of an interesting thought. The first research on alcohol as a disease started as early as 1784, when a Dr. Benjamin Rush described his work as an uncontrollable, overwhelming, irresistible desire to consume alcohol. And then two doctors, Pearson and Sutton, in their research, both described the concept of delirium tremors. So something that was starting to be looked at as a disease in 1784, really the disease concept of alcohol use didn't take hold until 1960s and 70s. What a long time to not look at the seriousness of this illness. So the idea that alcohol use is a disease was a concept that people struggled with for a long time because it was looked at mostly as a moral dilemma. And today, even recovering alcoholics and people still think it's just stop using and don't look at it as an illness. They see it as a problem. So there's some information here. In order to be considered a disease, certain maladies and anatomic abnormalities have to be present. Well, you don't find those things with alcohol use. You don't find fevers or nausea, except maybe in withdrawal. But it's interesting that hypertension, high blood pressure, is the same type of disease, but people always see high blood pressure as a disease. When I was first learning some things from Terence Gorski, I was taught that alcoholism, hypertension, and diabetes work in a concept of thirds. A third of the people with each one of these diseases gets it right off the bat. They quit drinking, they watch their sugar intake, and they slow down on that type A personality. That third usually can recover right away. The second third are the people that relapse, eat more sugar, continue to work 80 hours a week. All of you are probably familiar with that. And also continue to drink alcohol. That second third struggles but can recover. And then there's that last third. That's the third of people that have heart attacks, diabetics who may lose a limb, or alcoholics who either end up in, as AA says, in jail, institutions, or death. So it's kind of interesting to look at alcohol as a disease by comparing it to two other things that we definitely look at as a disease. So for me, I was fortunate to start working in addiction when the people that were professionals accepted the research that it was a disease, and that we really supported our thinking. And so we looked at it as a disease from the beginning. But we also knew that in order to treat alcoholism, psychological treatment, 12 steps, and other non-medical approaches need to happen. So for me, one of the most important teachings was the work of Terence Gorski. And I want to talk to you about, I want to teach alcoholics and their families about what we call PAWS, or post-acute withdrawal symptoms. But first, I want to share just a little bit on acute withdrawal. Acute withdrawal from alcohol is extremely dangerous. It happens in the first 3 to 5 days of somebody's decision to quit. The alcoholic who sometimes decides to quit cold turkey puts himself at serious risk. And what the risks are for withdrawal systems from alcohol: hallucinations, DTs, psychosis, seizures, and death. Alcohol and benzodiazepines are the two substances that people have to really carefully monitor their withdrawal. It's a good alcoholic, I'll use this term, knows that after a couple of days of not drinking, they start to have those shakes. A drink will solve their problem. And these people usually are chronic alcoholics who have blood alcohol levels in the 3.0s most of their day. So alcohol and benzos are substances which you go into severe withdrawal from that could lead to death. I'm not saying that people don't have withdrawal symptoms from other diseases, but if I was working in the woman's world, if somebody came in and they had been drinking for several days before they came in, I would immediately send them inpatient to detox medically and safely. If somebody came in to say, well, I just stopped using meth yesterday, I'd say, go in and sleep for a couple of days and you're going to be uncomfortable, but the withdrawal isn't dangerous. So I just wanted to point that out. So PAWS, post-acute withdrawal, that occurs when the brain recalibrates after addiction. Now, keep that in mind. The brain has to recalibrate in order to work. And post-acute withdrawal symptoms can last for a few days, but it also depends on the type of alcohol withdrawal, the amount you use, and the frequency used. But typically the brain recalibration, which is post-acute withdrawal, takes anywhere from 6 months to 2 years before the brain naturally produces endorphins and dopamine. 6 months to 2 years. That's a long time for people to struggle with post-acute withdrawal symptoms. And here's some of those symptoms: foggy thinking, trouble remembering, urges and cravings, irritability and hostility, sleep problems, lots of fatigue, issues with motor coordination, stress, sensitivity to stress. They can have anxiety or panic during these post-acute withdrawal times, feel depressed, don't have initiative or motivation, and they might not be able to focus, and they have mood swings. Unfortunately for the alcoholic and the family, those are all the things you see when the person's drinking as well. So oftentimes people will accuse their addict or their alcoholic, and that goes through all of us, family members, law officers, probation people, even counselors. Are you drinking? Are you drinking? Becomes a question, which can be pretty irritable for the alcoholic who really isn't. I'm not saying everybody's honest, that's the goal, but it can be pretty irritable for the alcoholic who hasn't been drinking, and being accused over and over can say, well, I just might as well drink. And that often becomes the case. I had one client tell me that his wife thought I gave him the information on post-acute withdrawal, so he had an excuse to drink, because it was really hard for her to understand and accept. So when we think people should be ready to take their lives back, their children back, their families back after a couple months, don't forget they may still be having post-acute withdrawal. Now, the other thing I wanted to talk about was, we've all heard it, whether from our parents, teachers, after school specials, family members, alcohol kills brain cells. Well, the experts say that's not true. It's a myth. Drinking does not kill the brain cells. It damages them in other ways. For instance, it damages the ends of neurons and can't send the messages to the other parts of the brain. But even though we drink, we think we may have lost a brain cell or two. There's no evidence that it actually happens. But alcohol still has a lot of effect on the brain. So one of the things we've learned is that the scientists always thought that the number of nerve cells in the adult brain was fixed early in life, that you never grew any more. If brain damage occurred, then the best way to treat it was by strengthening the neurons that were there. The reality is we grow new neurons every day. One of the things I've learned as an aging person, I have to teach my new neurons how to change the pathways. So one of the things that I will teach my alcoholics is you've got to change the way you do things. You've got to try new things, go dancing, read, listen to a different type of music, buy, seek, and find puzzles, change your patterns so that your new neurons have a chance to grow, develop, and stay in that brain of yours. So those are pretty important things. But researchers know, and then this came about in 1960s, that a process called neurogenesis is what causes us to have new brain cells. They originate from stem cells. They divide indefinitely, they renew themselves, and they just happen to give variety to all kinds of cell types. The discovery of brain cells, stem cells, and adult neurogenesis provides a new way of approaching the problem. So now that we know that you don't kill brain cells with alcohol, and we can grow new ones, we have to help people realize that keep those new ones growing, change, do new things, otherwise they die off and disappear too. Now, killing brain cells used to be a good way. Tell your kids, you drink, you're going to kill your brain cells. So now we have to say, it doesn't kill your brain cells, but it really severely damages them. So I want to talk about how alcohol affects the brain in several different ways. I want to talk about the fetal brain, the child brain, the adult brain, and then finally at the end, because this was a request, and I am so glad, I think it was Kathy that asked Lori to have me talk about the elder brain. I want to talk about what happens to the older person as they drink. So during the first trimester of birth, the brain develops rapidly, makes up half of the fetus's weight. During that time, the brain grows millions of neurons, and that connects synapses to direct movement and growth. So in the first trimester, your brain, the baby brain, is trying to help this baby grow. Let's not put alcohol in that mix. In the second trimester, the brain begins to direct the compression of the chest muscles, which includes things that are important for breathing and swallowing. And then the third trimester is there's a rapid growth and a rapid development of neurons in the brain, and it's an explosive growth. The baby's brain will triple in size during this time. So those are three things to keep in mind, that when we put alcohol in that mix, we're always doing something to that young fetal brain. So researchers have long known that babies exposed to alcohol before birth are at risk of developing lifelong cognitive and behavioral impairments. Poor motor skills, increased sensitivity to sensory stimulation, and difficulty with self-regulation. These kids may have altered brains, and that can say that their brain volume may be affected. So keep in mind that we don't know how much alcohol, when use of it starts, what happens to each brain. It's something we're still working on. But a baby brain depends on two kinds of networks: physical network, collection of brain cells, which connect and communicate by sending signals cell to cell. And the other is a functional network, which uses the physical network to connect regions of the brain directly or indirectly, and acting in coordinated manner to help brain function and brain blood flow. Well, am I talking too fast? Oh, well. So the important thing is we don't know how much alcohol, what age it starts, how often it happens. But the best thing for all of us to do is, if we're going to be pregnant, don't drink. Because when you look back and you see, and if any of you have done any research, if you looked at what fetal alcohol syndrome can do to kids, it's pretty damaging. And we look at kids today and we say, well, they don't know how to focus in school, or they don't know how to pay attention, or they don't know how to sit still. Wonder what happened to their brains when they were developing. So after that, we talk about that brain that develops when we're children. For children and young people under 18, the best thing is to just not drink. But anyone who grew up in a family where there was an alcoholic probably knows that you're sitting on dad's lap and a drink of beer is acceptable, or might have been a party at the house and you woke up in the morning and you went around and finished all the stuff that was left there. I would talk to people in my IOP group. How old were you when you started drinking? I heard everything from 6 to 18. Younger than 15 is really dangerous for kids to start drinking. My saddest thing, one of my saddest things was I asked a young guy, when did you first feel a part of your family? And his statement was, when my dad took me in the back room and shot me up for the first time, like everyone else in the family did. I was 7 years old. So when we think about that, it's makes us wonder why our kids are struggling today. Alcohol is a depressant. It causes the brain to slow down, and it affects the child's brain all the way up into their mid-20s. We used to think the brain was developed by around 18. Not the case. They say 21, 22, 23. And it really can help affect our kids' performance in school. So kids under 15 are at the greatest risk of harm from drinking. And for kids 15 to 17, if they could stop drinking until their brain has a little more time to develop, they're in better shape. The earlier a person starts drinking, the greater the levels, or the greater the risk they have to developing problems in their brain. They can have memory problems, learning problems, and they can also result in slurred speech, confusion, poor vision, muscle control and judgment, slower reactions, lack of coordination, and sleep problems. Research tells us that the alcohol can damage the developing brain, but we don't know how much alcohol it takes to do this. We don't know how it affects kids under 18. We're still studying and we're still looking at that. But your kid's brain, our brain, develops into their early 20s. So the alcohol use on the developing brain can be a serious problem. It can affect their school performance. It can negatively affect their mood, their body. All kinds of problems can occur for them. There are two areas of the brain that are most affected by these changes, and one's the hippocampus, which is responsible for memory and learning. Studies of adolescents show that heavy and extended alcohol use is associated with a 10% reduction in the size of their hippocampus. It also shows that the function of the hippocampus is uniquely sensitive to alcohol, and that alcohol may be poisonous to the nerve cells and cause damage or cause them even to be destroyed. Then the other part of the brain that's really functioned by it is the prefrontal lobe. And that's important for planning, judgment, and decision-making, impulse control, and language in this area of the brain that changes the most during their teenage years. So these are two major important areas of the brain that are definitely affected by the use of young people. But is that it? Does it continue? Do more problems grow during adulthood? Sure. So we all know that people have problems walking, slurred speech, they are slow, they can't remember things. Alcohol affects the brain. We've seen that after somebody with a few drinks. And sometimes they stop drinking and it stops. But then there's that person who drinks over a long period of time, and those things might continue to happen over time, and especially well after they have achieved their sobriety. So it's not just put down your alcohol and you're done. It's put down your alcohol, put down your drug, and work your program of recovery. Post-acute withdrawal, 6 months to 2 years. The other thing that Terence Gorski taught us was After about 5 years of no substance use, no alcohol, your brain is optimized as if it had never started drinking in the first place. So your brain is an amazing thing that can really regenerate, recalibrate. I like that term. We don't know heavy drinking has far-reaching effects on the brain. The factors that cause the problem are how much and how often a person drinks. Don't forget too that the person who goes for months without drinking and then binges for a weekend is at exceedingly more risk sometimes than the chronic alcoholic, because they're consistently throwing this brain damaging substance into the mix. So moderate drinking can lead to short-term impairment. Heavy drinking leads to much more. It depends on how much and how often you drink, the age at which you start drinking, and how long you've been drinking. Alcohol is a slow killer. It takes a long time to get to the seriously damaging effects. The person's age, their level of education, gender, genetic background, and a family history of alcoholism all play in. Were they at risk for prenatal alcohol exposure? And their general health is important. The alcohol alert, if ever you want to look into something, go in and research alcohol alert. It shows some common disorders that are associated with alcohol-related brain damage. It looks at traditional as well as emerging therapies for treatment and the prevention of alcoholism. So how does it affect the brain? It has a profound effect on the complex structures of the brain. It blocks chemical signals between brain cells. It leads to, and I've said this over and over, and I just think it's worth repeating, the common immediate symptoms: impulsive behavior, slurred speech, poor memory. Heavy drinking continues over a long period of time. The brain can adapt to blocked signals. The brain continues to overactivate the neurotransmitters. It's painfully dangerous withdrawal. The damage can be made worse by drinking binges and sudden withdrawal. If you decide to go cold turkey, you have to be very careful. You could go into seizures or death or hallucinations. I had a man in the hospital, and we thought after 3 days he was doing pretty well when I worked at the mental health unit. We realized after 5 days he was still in withdrawal, and we had to act fast because he was in trouble, and we missed it. So you have to always medically monitor that person. So it's very important that we work with our alcoholic and help them seek medical help or physical help to do their withdrawal. The other thing is alcohol affects a large portion of the brain. The cognitive impairment can occur as a result of heavy drinking. We've seen it. Blackouts. We've seen it in our family and friends, and they can't solve problems. Their impulse control is hurt. And Lori mentioned to me something that I want to address here quickly. The whole concept of what we call wet brain, which is technically the Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. Without treatment, cognitive impairment grows worse, eventually developing into a lasting syndrome known as alcohol-related dementia, which at present represents about 10% of all dementia cases. Additionally, alcohol is estimated to contribute roughly to 29% of all other dementia cases. Cognitive deficits are made worse by malnutrition, vitamin B deficiency. Oftentimes we will start somebody on a vitamin B regimentation. Malnutrition and heavy use causes serious impairments in memory, can lead to a permanent cognitive disorder called Wernicke-Korsakoff. It has 2 stages. First, there's a brief time when the person has intense inflammation and swelling in their brain. This is known as Wernicke's encephalopathy. If this condition isn't treated quickly, the person may develop a long-term condition called Korsakoff syndromes. This has many of the symptoms of dementia, but about 1/4 of the people affected by Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome who get treatment make good recovery, half make a partial recovery, and 1/4 may never recover or spend the rest of their life in a specialized care home. And this is that later in life effect of long-term use. Just to share a little bit about the alcoholic, I had one person who came to me in the hospital. after years of recovery and relapse, and for 3 months, he thought he was the most stupid thing on the planet. He couldn't get out of his depression, couldn't get past that. He considered himself gone, wasted. And we spent a lot of time trying to help him recognize that he needed brain repair medication. That's what I call antidepressants and psychiatric medication these days, brain repair. And if he would take it, he would start to see himself develop a little more of his cognitive abilities. He was really angry at himself because he was a very smart person. And it was really hurtful to him that he had lost so much of his ability to think, react, and be. But we had him in inpatient for about 3 months, which is way longer than we usually would keep somebody. But he was chronically suicidal because of how he felt about himself. Now, I want to talk about how alcohol can affect you differently as you age. I'm going to throw in a little bit about my own brother. We were raised by an alcoholic dad. He was a hard worker, functional alcoholic, we would say, always brought home the money. We always had food on the table. He wasn't abusive, but he was always angry. But my brother had real resentments towards his drinking. So my brother did not drink. My brother had his doctorate degree in chemical engineering by the time he was 22 years old. He was a brilliant kid. He didn't drink until he was maybe 45. And then he decided he was going to be a connoisseur of high-end wines. And so he started making wines because he had that lifestyle. Well, now at this present moment at 77, he has end-stage liver disease and alcoholism because he started drinking, and it connected him to all those problems that my dad suffered as a younger man. My dad did get into recovery. He went to a 90-day rehab and turned it around. Right now, my brother is starting to recover a little, and we're all hopeful. But in our elder days, alcohol affects us differently. Some of the problems are these. Older people have an increased sensitivity to alcohol. We tend to be dehydrated. We have health problems. We have interactions with medications, and we are at great risk for STDs, and I'll talk about that. My brother had all of those except for the last one, I think, and he didn't think that he had a problem. People who are older become more sensitive to the effects of alcohol because of the reduced activity of an enzyme that breaks down alcohol. This happens to us over a longer time. So we may think that we were somebody that could drink a couple glasses of wine every night, but it's 65, 75. We can't. Things change. Our body changes, and we don't respond to alcohol the same way. Older adults often run the risk of dehydration because as we age, the need of our thirst diminishes, renal function declines, body mass changes, the way sodium and water are balanced in our body. One study looked at the correlation between dehydrations and falls among the elderly population, found that 38% of the more than 30,000 participants were dehydrated. So this hit me, and I thought, Patty, you need to drink water. Help get going. Don't dehydrate. But 4 in 10 older adults were admitted into the hospitals because of dehydration. Alcohol can cause us to dehydrate more. So we're already at risk of being dehydrated by virtue of our age. So we're drinking, and that causes dehydration. Alcohol can exacerbate other health issues. Diabetes, high blood pressure, congestive heart failure, liver problems, osteoporosis, memory problems, and mood disorders. If we have any of these things going on in our physical body, we really need to monitor our alcohol use because it just increases our physical health problems. Sometimes there are seriously bad interactions with alcohol. Almost all medicines say do not use alcohol with these, but most of us don't always hear that. One study found that 1 in 5 older adults took medications that could have negative interactions with alcohol, and they used alcohol along with their medications. Some of the things that can cause problems are aspirin, acetaminophen, cold and allergy medicines, cough syrup, sleeping pills, pain medication, mood stabilizers, antidepressants, and at the end, herbal remedies, kava kava, St. John's wort, chamomile, valerian, and lavender. All of these things might interact with alcohol. And unfortunately, our population, those of us who fall into that boomer baby age, a rising problem among the elderly is the spread of sexually transmitted diseases, especially among those who are living in senior living communities. The diagnosis rates for herpes simplex, gonorrhea, syphilis, hep B, trichomoniasis, and chlamydia rose from 2015 to 2019, affecting thousands of adults aged 65 and older. Add alcohol to the mix and inhibitions are gone. That leads to the spread of STDs. So every age of our life is affected by alcohol, from fetus to older age. So it's something that we want to keep in mind. I'm kind of glad I haven't had 27 years of alcohol, because I've had 2 hip replacements and I had lymphoma, which I had to have chemo, and I got it through all of those. And I'm so glad that I didn't have alcohol to interact with any of the things that were going on in my medical care. So in many ways, alcohol differs from other diseases. It develops slowly over a person's lifetime, can occur in all ages, all walks of life, all professions. It has no single known cause. Heredity, culture, economics, the environment all contribute to it. Third, alcohols and their alcohol-related disabilities can change over time. So it's just one of those things that we really have to watch, manage, and be careful with. I've experienced a lot of people in withdrawal, with alcohol hallucinations, with being told they're bipolar. Post-acute withdrawal symptoms may account for a lot of things. In conclusion, my best advice is let's not drink. So, and I'm not somebody that doesn't understand that some of us can have a drink now and then, but keep in mind how you drink, when you drink, and what alcohol can do to your body system. And with that, I'm open for questions.
Awesome. Thank you, Patty. We have 2 questions here in the chat. One was, does portal systematic, gosh, how do you pronounce that, George? I'm not giving it a try. I can't hear you, George. I think you're, Patty, George, we can't hear you, but I'll take a stab at it. Patty, in the chat here, George mentions, does portal systematic encephalopathy damage brain cells with elevated blood ammonia?
Good question. Can you send that to me and I'll look into it, because I'm not sure I even know what you're asking, George.
Okay, you got it. I will email that to you.
Thank
And
you.
then the other question we have here from Sherry is, Patty, could you define moderate drinking?
Moderate drinking of one, I will define it, but remember, it's different for all folks. A lot of things go into play: your age, your body size, your body mass. I would say moderate drinking is at the max a couple glasses of wine, a bottle of beer, maybe 2, no more. The less, the better. Binge drinking is a danger for those of us who may not drink and then think, okay, I didn't drink all week, so I can have 6 beers on the weekend. That's not moderate drinking, that's heavy drinking. And if you want to go into some of the research, you can look at what each drink does to the brain. And there's lots of things out there that say 2 drinks go here, 3 drinks go there, 10 drinks actually affect all your body's organs. So moderate drinking, I would say a couple beers, a glass of wine, not much more. I hope that answers your question, Sherry.
Patty, this is Lori. I think that, that's an excellent question, and there can be a cultural aspect to it. Canada recently came out with a study that defined moderate drinking as, if I understood it right, a couple of glasses of wine a week, not a day.
Not a
week.
day.
And I know from you and me teaching mental health first aid together, we did a lot, there's a section on alcohol, and you can ask somebody, are you drinking much? And it's a point of reference for someone. They may think 2 beers isn't much, but the person next to them may think, well, I drink a 6-pack a day, or I drink a 12-pack when I sit down. And that's not much, because it's their point of reference.
And that makes sense. And I think that's where all the individual information comes in. People drank alcohol because there wasn't water that was clean. People used alcohol for years for lots of other reasons. Lots of cultures drink alcohol all the time. That doesn't mean that everybody's going to become dependent or have an alcohol disease, but the number of people that are impaired, even momentarily, by the use of, say, a 6-pack, that goes directly to a lot of our body organs. It goes right into our brain. First place the alcohol goes is your brain immediately. If we're looking at what our brain does, and research today tells us that we have 3 brains: the head brain, the heart brain, and the gut brain. Why do they know we have 3 brains? They're the exact same number of neurons in each of those parts of our body. So I think we have the thinking brain, the feeling brain, and the intuitive brain. And when we drink that much alcohol, we're affecting all parts of ourselves. Our thinking brain goes right to those neurons first. So I don't know, Lori, that's a good point. Everybody's always saying what's moderate, what's not. There's a whole thing about not abstinent, but let's look at safe drinking, careful drinking, decreased drinking. Watch yourself. If after a couple beers you're a little bit slurry or a little bit tired, or you can't function quite as well as you used to, you've done some damage to your brain. After 6, you may think you're functioning well, but ask your family members how you're doing. They might have a completely different opinion. So yeah, we're going to hear lots of different studies on like 2 a week to a 6-pack. I think we have to be careful as humans and individuals. What's it doing to us? Let me use this as an example. My grandfather probably was one of the most functional men I knew. Outdoors man, was a rigger on the oil wells in Oklahoma. He probably drank chronically all his life, and we did not even realize it. And the first time I realized it was that bad for him was I'm in the hospital with him. He had appendicitis and it burst. And I'm standing at the nurse's station, and one of the girls says, "That old coot down in that room is seeing spiders on the wall." For me, I went, wait a minute, that old coot is my grandfather. And I don't know, but I bet he's in withdrawal from alcohol. Please go check. Because I wouldn't have known that it was that bad had he not been in the hospital that many days and somebody was seeing the effects of his detox. And that was in like the middle 70s. That was a long time ago. So we've come a long way, but they didn't even look at it as a problem. To me, being aware of what alcohol was doing to people, I went, no, he's in trouble.
I think this is Laura, I think as family members, a lot of us in this meeting here grew up with parents that were drinking, and there's that societal acceptance, and you mentioned it, where it was so accepted. My parents drank martinis every night. That was just their lifestyle. My sister, when she was in her 40s, I believe, developed pancreatitis, and her doctor said, "You can't drink alcohol. Is this going to be a problem for you? Your body can't metabolize it. One drink could kill you. It's a crapshoot. You could have one and survive it, or it could kill you. Is that going to be a problem?" And no one in the family knew that would have been a problem for her. And she came forward and she said, as a matter of fact, it is. And she told my parents that she was an alcoholic, and their response to her was, "No, you're not." because what would that make them? You know,
Right.
it's just a whole shift in perspective and thinking,
Right.
and the family, you know, being an alcoholic had, you know, negative connotation to it. But for her, it was a life changer, and she started going to AA. She brought me to an Al-Anon meeting, which was really helpful for me at that early stage of her recovery, to learn that, you know, it's not anybody's fault. It's that person. You know, you can't blame it on other people. It just really opened up a whole lot of family dynamic. Something else I learned through that was, if you have someone who's drinking, before that happened, her husband, without saying anything to her, drew a line on one of the liquor bottles. And she thought, oh, again, no
Somebody
harm,
sees me. Yeah.
you know, but that led her to closet drinking, and that was when her drinking increased, because she didn't want her husband to see how much she was drinking. She started buying bottles and putting them other places and drinking more. So
And
I
that's
think
where
that
the,
how we manage it within our family, with our loved ones.
yes.
And one of the questions I had, Patty, for you was kind of like, when is the threshold crossed from I'm drinking because I choose to I'm drinking because I have a brain disease? It's now an illness.
So-
DSM recently recognized it as an illness.
So I'm going to answer your question, Lori, and then I saw two that came up in the chat. I'll try to field, but most people don't drink because they choose to. Most of us drink because it solves a problem. Shy, afraid, family system, everybody's, I'm depressed. And many of us, even young people, start to use substances to solve their mental health issues. Yes, they choose alcohol because you talked about it. Your sister would not have sought help for her alcohol use because of the stigma. It means you're a moral degenerate person if you use alcohol. So people would use alcohol to do a lot of mental health problem solving. So I think that increases your the propensity of you becoming that person that crosses the line into addiction. When I worked in Pennsylvania in the 80s, I would see people that came into relapse several times after a 12-step program or other things they tried didn't work. And usually there was an underlying depression, anxiety, or mental health issue that we started to recognize. So for me, when you your family starts to notice it, when you start to hide, when you start to get to the place where you can't be honest about your drinking, when you become so ashamed of who you are that you don't share. I was a competitive drinker in college. It was a source of pride. I could outdrink anybody. And I was like 5 foot and 90 pounds, but wow, that was a source of pride for me. I was bigger and better than a lot of people. So I think it depends on the individual. And my dad's drinking, when he got recovery, they found that he had a cancer in his stomach that everybody had always thought it was because he was drinking so much. So once he quit, they found out more and physical health issues that he was having. So to me, the answer to that question is very individual, but I think it's a lot of when you're dishonest, when you stop showing up for work, when people notice memory problems. So George, your question on the liver and the portal, thank you. I'm glad you put that in chat again. Now I see what you're asking. I'm going to make an assumption, but I'd rather do some more looking. That, yeah, I think that the ammonia level in the liver is badly damaged by drinking. We all know that in Chinese medicine, the liver is the seat of anger. Isn't that interesting? Many alcoholics are also ragers and angry. But the nice thing about our liver, it can regenerate. And if we quit drinking, it can continue to grow and become healthy again. But there's a point in when that ammonia level becomes so strong that we can't recover from it. And Rose, your question was about the genetics of addiction. I think all of us can look back, and I did not realize this. I knew my dad's family was drinkers, and at the end of my mom's life, she said to me that her parents were alcoholics. Her grandmother was a nurse. Her mother was a nurse. Her father was a plumber, but they drank all the time too. So my family system was hit with a lot of genetic predisposition to alcohol, and it comes based on the amount of alcohol that was used in the family system. Irish Catholic, absolutely. We get the name of being alcohol in our genetics. The thing for me is awareness of that, a source of pride. We told my grandchildren that lived here when they were 3 and 5 about the family history of alcohol and drug use. Their father was a cocaine addict. And we encouraged them to know from that day on, if you're ever in a car with somebody who's drinking and driving, they chose, teenagers in this day and age, not to drink until they were over 21, because I think of that early education and letting them know what it could do to their brain. And also, without any fear of stigma and without any shame, to say it's in our family system. We all have the genes to become problem drinkers or have alcohol issues. And so that was for me a sense of pride in education, because when they turned 21, they had their first drink. It was such a surprise, because when I was 14, I had my first. So I hope that answered that question.
Yeah, thank you.
And George, I'm going to do some looking on that liver question. So I'll either find a way to get back to you or give Lori the information.
Patty, I
Thank you.
have a question. Oops, sorry, go ahead, George.
I was just saying thank you very much. I'll put my email in.
Okay, thank you.
Christina.
Awesome. Thanks, George. Patty, I was sort of wondering, for those of us who, I concur with the whole Irish Catholic. I grew up Irish Catholic, and I grew up Irish Catholic in a small town in Wisconsin of 1,200 people. We were on Jeopardy for the most beer consumed per capita. That's what we do, right? We don't
Yeah.
have movie theaters and malls, and
Yeah.
it's in a very rural community. So this was part of our culture. This is what you did Friday nights and Sunday after church. And so for someone who's struggling in that environment, what do you recommend for family and friends on the outside, seeing that they can't control the alcohol like others seem to seem to show?
Right. Well, and that's thank you. That's a great question, because I know in the case of my grandkids, they were picked on and bullied because they didn't smoke pot or they didn't go out and drink. My one grandson was the designated driver for most of his friends in the area. So culturally, people go out and drink on Friday nights. And if you live in an area where that's the culture, it's kind of hard to say, well, that's a problem and that's wrong, because then you're bullied, looked down on, and you're the goody two shoes. So partly for me, it's that education of what this can do to you or for you, but also to work on what I think was a huge piece of the issue for young people in drinking, is to start to learn to love themselves, accept who they are, learn that they can stand up for themselves and they don't have to bow to the cultural norm to be an okay person. And I think that's a huge piece of the problem, because we want to be accepted. And if you're in a small community, which I can relate to that as where I grew up, and that's what everybody did. That's what was going on all the time. And we don't have much defense other than, this is who I am, this is how I choose to be. I remember when I first quit drinking, Kristen, I used to go out, and that was the first time I quit. I relapsed a couple times, but I would never go out without having a Coke and a lime, so it looked like I was just like everybody else. So I think that'll helping people to understand that, be who you are, own yourself, learn to love yourself. And that's a job for all of us to teach ourselves and our kids going forward. I don't know if that helped or answered it.
Yes, Patty, that helps a lot. And I think of my brother who's been struggling with alcohol on and off his entire life. And when he comes home to the small town in Wisconsin, it's just, he relapses every time. He just doesn't know how to, I don't think he knows how to deal with that environment, but I don't think the environment knows how to deal with him. You know, like my family, do they stop drinking and just not drink when he's around? Do we encourage him to, I mean, we don't have coffee shops, all we have is bars. So do we encourage him to, like you said, bring a cup of Coke with him? And
I did that. It helped me get through those nights and then somebody would say, do you need another one? I say, no, I'm fine. Or I did not say out loud that I have quit drinking or I have a drinking problem. And there's that becomes an issue because you want to fit in. And if how you fit in before was with alcohol, you revert back to those old ways. And it's shameful to say I have to quit. I was talking about my brother. He credited the fact that he was a high-end wine drinker and he bought expensive wines as opposed to being a guy that sat and had a bunch of beers every night. So we make excuses and we justify our reasons for using a lot. And so part of that becomes learning that this is not who I am. This does not have to be who I am. And working your way into not drinking and then recovering from the things that kept you stuck in that drinking role. So recovery is a lot longer process than we just quit. We change our entire way of thinking. I say today for me that when I am in my disease, and only I separate it, I say when I'm in dis-ease, when I'm struggling, when I'm under stress, when I'm feeling a lot of issues, I recognize that that's what I used to do all the time. And I always used a drink to solve those problems. So I own it. Today I'm in my dis-ease. I was nervous starting today. That was a dis-ease moment for me. And I had to fall back on, you're going to do the best you can. You're going to give what you have. And people are either going to like it or not, but just relax and be you. So those are one of the things that I feel is helpful for people to recognize that the alcohol use and eating addictions, all those things are a way to help with our dis-ease. The other thing, I just wanted to share this too. I had a great teacher in the early 90s, Robert Ackerman. And one of my favorite things, because we always throw out this, oh, they're dysfunctional. Oh, they're from a dysfunctional family. He taught me that dys, is the Greek root word for pain. And so I see people as people who function in pain because most of us are here. We're walking, we're talking, we have jobs, we get through the day, but we may have grown up functioning in pain, the pain of somebody else's addiction, of being bullied, lots of things that caused us to feel the pain of being different and not knowing who we are and learning to love ourselves. Does that make sense? I hope that helped your question about your brother.
yes, that does. Thank you, Pat. Other questions?
Yeah, Patty, it seems like people with addictive personalities get addicted easily to alcohol, food, gambling, tobacco. Is there, what causes that addictive personality? Is there something in the brain already? I mean, it's probably some genetic predisposition again, but it seems like so many people have just multiple addictions.
No, I agree with that. And it's like you switch addictions, you stop drinking and you start gambling, or you start I was an anxiety eater. And so I would eat a bag of potato chips. I used to laugh and say, that's my new addiction, wavy laid potato chips. And I look back and I know that as a kid, and now there are even Rose doing studies of things that are going on in the womb. While a woman is pregnant, if she's going through a lot of anxiety, the child is also struggling with that anxiety. So I think when we look at things like that, yes, genetics, to environment, and I think environment plays a key. If you are struggling with a lot of anxiety, today, all kids get diagnosed with attention deficit. How many of those kids are just kids that were anxious, struggling, trying to fit into a system? I'm look at myself as somebody who was a risk taker. And it was a badge of pride for me, because I loved to downhill ski faster than anybody. We'd build mobiles, but I hated the slow trotting cross-country skiing. I was a risk taker. Part of my risk taking led to my alcohol use, and I would risk using a whole lot of alcohol. Fortunately, I saw some awful things in college that said to me, don't go there. A boyfriend took me to a cocaine shooting den. 1 minute in that place, I went, okay, he's done, I'm done, move on. So my risk became minimized because of some of the things I saw and decided not to follow through with. But yeah, I'm a risk taker. I'm an adrenaline junkie, I would say. Faster the better, the more I work, the better. Those are some things that I grew up in. Many of us grew up in, if you don't work hard, you don't succeed type of family system, which just increases some anxiety. So I always look at anxiety and depression, which Lori will concur with this. We learned that the average age for anxiety and depression to start an anxiety, especially, was around 11. If that's the average age, think about this little person that goes to school at 3, where all night long there's fighting in the family from alcohol use. That child is going to have anxiety from the get-go. And does that make this kid unavailable to focus, to understand school? And does that make this child become a attention deficit disorder kid? So yeah, addictive personalities, I believe, are personality traits that we develop as we grow in our environment. In a 12-step program, they ask us to say defects of character. I hated that word. I would never say defects, because I had a hard time, because I believed I was defective for a long time. But I would say personality traits that no longer serve me. Procrastination, that was one of mine. Less than maybe 2 months ago, I went to an ACOA meeting, an ACA meeting for adult children of alcoholics. And I learned at 75 that my procrastination was because if I procrastinated, I didn't get criticized as much as if I finished something and it was wrong or I made a mistake. So I learned to procrastinate, to not make mistakes, to not be seen as wrong. So we're always learning a little bit about our environment. I grew up in a wonderful family system, and I had a lot of positives, except for the fact that my dad drank a lot, but I didn't want to make a mistake because that made me not good enough. So I think environment helps us grow that addictive personality. Does that make sense? And I'm sure there's probably a genetic component too, but I do believe that we can change our genetics and our DNA today, and we can change who we are based on what we learn about our true self. Does that help?
Yes, thank you, Patty.
Okay. Nice to see you, Rose.
Yeah, thank you. You
Been a long
too.
time. Anything else?
So, yeah, this is Lori again. Patty, with treatment, well, first let me say, in my personal career, as in the clinical realm, reviewing assessments and doing assessments with people, it just seems that there are people are starting use earlier on. I used to be shocked when I'd see this person started using marijuana, using alcohol at the age of 7. You know, when I was growing up, those things were just starting, and it was towards the end of high school or somewhere in there. And I think that your grandsons, for them to avoid it till 21 is just says a whole lot about the support and education and the success of that, and where that's missing in so many family systems. But with recovery and rehab, you talked about the 1/3 that succeed earlier than others, and the 1/3 that are in the recovery, and the 1/3 that are going to meet it with an early death, unfortunately. But I know that we have all of these residential treatment centers, and it can be a whole relief. Oh, the family member says, oh, you're going to get fixed. Well, of course, we don't like using that word, but what I understand, and I want you to say maybe something about it, is if I'm a person who goes into residential treatment, there can be a series of times where I need that because relapse is more common than not. And it just takes that maybe seventh time into a residential
Yes.
treatment center for me to have a longer time of sobriety.
So that's good, Lori. Thank you. For those of us who were privileged enough to work with Frank Gagliardi, I remember coming from Pittsburgh area in 1995 to Arizona was like culture shock. The only place I could send somebody to for detox was down to Lark, 24th and Van Buren in Phoenix. And I had to say, don't tell them you're from Yavapai County, just stand outside the door till they take you in. But Frank Gagliardi asked me once, how many rehabs should somebody have? And all I could say was as many as it takes. So many of the people that I work with have been in rehab multiple times. There's that 1/3 that gets it. They quit drinking, they decide it's a problem, and they may go into a 12-step program. They may do one rehab, and they don't relapse. I have a friend of ours who we worked with in the clinic has probably almost 40 years and never relapsed once. She got it. But I have lots of people who relapse over and over. And I think the bottom line of that, Lori, is because we don't look at the mental health treatment part as much. And we're starting to see that more. And we're starting to help people understand that it's not a character defect. Ooh, crash out there. They're not bad people, but there's something that just wasn't addressed in their treatment and in their direction. So the more we can address with the alcoholic and addict, it's important for them to work a 12-step program. I used to struggle with people who say, oh, 12 steps is all they need. But I'd say, well, wait a minute, they need therapy too. And they may need a nutrition change, and they may need to take some vitamin supplements for a while. We need to look at the whole person, the whole body, mind, soul thinking. And unfortunately, relapse happens over and over because I don't think people get it the first time. And they easily fall back into what worked for them. Oh, I was sad when I drank. I was happy. I had friends. Oh, I always found a reason to justify using again. It was popular. I think what Christina said, it was cultural. You didn't go out without having a drink. That became the norm. So it's looking at all those aspects, and that takes a lot of time. And I'm not so sure that people are starting earlier. I think maybe people started earlier than we realized, and it wasn't discussed. My dad was a kid in the Depression and during Prohibition. My grandfather had a still. My dad at 7, his job was to deliver the alcohol in his newspapers. He was the paper boy and the alcohol deliverer. So I think things like that have probably been going on for a long time, and it just hasn't become as evident. So when we hear about the younger age that people are drinking, 1, I think there are more doing it at a younger age, but 2, I think that they're being more honest about when they started. Does that make sense?
It does. It does. And on the subject of youth, we're really looking at how youth are struggling in the high school age, junior high and high school, and school boards and some of the the school systems aren't paying real attention to what's going on with these kids. And you, in your prior job, you were doing substance use groups and therapy with teenagers.
Right.
What can you share with us that might help us with kids or grandkids for recovery?
So I did an adolescent substance use group. And one of the things that I found helpful was really hearing them, listening to what was going on in their world, why they felt alcohol was better than something else. The kids that I was seeing, marijuana and it becoming legal brought up that whole idea of Can we use it for depression? How can it help us? Marijuana and mushrooms were really prevalent. And of course, a couple of them played around with fentanyl. Most of them came from families that had alcohol or addiction in them, or from families where they felt like they were not valued and not wanted. So I think it's really tough to be a teacher today. How do we value our children? How do we not see this kid as somebody who doesn't want to listen to me, but recognizing that this is a kid who may have something going on that's really tragic in their world? I like to look at their backstories. I like to look at the backstory of all the people I work with. What's your backstory? How come your backstory has to be your present moment? And if you grew up in a family system where drinking was always happening and you got removed from your family, put in a foster care, all you wanted to do was get back to your family. But how can you get back to your family and take care of you in the process? Make sure you don't choose to follow that direction. And I would have lots of kids say, I don't want to go down the road my mom went down. I don't want to drink the way she did, but I don't want to be separate from her. I want to be there. A lot of that young codependent children or the parental child stuff comes in for those kids. So I work with those things, and I work a lot with what I was sharing with Rose. How to help these kids become true to who they are, find out who they are, see what their authentic self has to offer them in the world, rather than thinking they have to find a substance to mask everything, to cover everything up, and to help them get past the depression. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
If I could just add two things, Patty, I had to go grab this book. I don't know if anyone's read it or not, but it's called Dopamine Nation, Finding Balance in the Age of Indulgence. It's fascinating, and it really sort of speaks to what's happening in today's society and today's culture, right? So, something so simple as if you're watching Netflix and you're watching a movie series, what happens after another episode, right? You have the button there that unless you have to click to stop it, it'll go to the next episode, and before you know it,
Yes.
it's 2 o'clock in the morning and you're up
Right.
watching TV yet, right? And so, talking about phones and social media and everything else that we have access to, we're just so used to having the indulgence and being able to grab something that's helpful, that's easy, versus going towards that pain, which can also cause dopamine if we
Right.
move towards the pain. So anyways, I thought this book was really helpful, but I think the other important thing to recognize is with our young people, to Lori's question, is we as parents and grandparents, we really need to be able to model these things for our kids at home, right? And model those healthy coping mechanisms. I think of growing up and, mom and dad come home and like, oh man, it was a really long day, I need a beer. Right? How about,
Yes.
well, it was a really long day, I need to just take a break and take a bath, or, go for a walk, right? And so my husband still says that, and I have to correct him and remind him, babe, we got to model the way we're speaking. And I think that's no different with our younger generation now. They're seeing and hearing that dad's going to the bar after work, and that's going to help him cope with what's going on, right? So
he's
many
much
times, as soon
better.
as they have access to that, I think that's helpful.
So I
And
think
Nadine, I blurred my background because I haven't made my bed yet today, but it's Dopamine Nation. I'll put the title in the chat here as well. They
that's
had it
great.
at Not My Kid, the doctor who read it, who was addicted to I'm trying to think of which like pornography and sexual texts, and she would be up all night reading texts, and found that she had an addiction, and so now she treats clients where she has clients take a break from the phone for a month, and they've had a lot of success with that. But it's a good book, so I'll put it in chat. But I just wanted to mention that really
Oh,
helped
thank
me
you.
understand
Yeah.
today's culture and society more than I've really understood it up to this point.
We think of instant gratification. We knew it was a problem,
Yes.
and now we have twice as much instant
Right.
gratification going on.
Right, exactly.
I'm gonna grab a book too, real quick.
While Patty's grabbing that book, I'm just gonna mention, I think at one of the conferences that we went to, where Patrick Kennedy spoke, and he's an advocate for people with mental illness and addictions. He lives with bipolar disorder, and he's gone through a lot of rehab and stuff. And one of the things that stuck in my mind was he made an analogy to driving down the freeway, where you can take this exit or you can take the next exit. There are a lot of off ramps you can take to get to maybe the same place. And what works for one person isn't going to work for the next person. So it isn't like a one size fits all.
So I want to read this one, and this is from a book called Natural Rest for Addiction. And there's a lot of people looking at things, but this one hit me. Remember, addiction is the constant movement to escape from the present moment and the uncomfortable thoughts of and feelings of the past. So anytime we're finding we have to escape from our present moment, our addiction is in charge. And when we run from whatever was going on in the past. So a lot of the work that we've been doing over the last 20 years, stay in your present moment. Try to stay present with what's going on for you. Try to stay connected, because addiction is when we have to run from that present moment to escape anything that feels uncomfortable. So I think that's a pretty good definition of addiction, and it takes it away from, it addresses a little bit Rose's question about that addictive personality. When we're running from something or running. I always say, when I moved here, it was a geographic change, huge. It was a move to something for me. It wasn't a run from something, and it was probably one of the best moves I made. But I was going to run away when I went through a divorce, but my children said, please don't take us away from our school and our friends. So I stayed there until they graduated, and then chose to go to something. So I chose to stay in my present moment and not run from the pain of being in that divorce situation where I was living, until things felt right and I was able to take my present moment and bring it with me to Arizona.
It's sort of like mindfulness, right? Always
Yes,
being in the
absolutely.
present.
And once you're in the present, or when you find yourself out of your present moment, you can always pivot back into the present moment. You can always say, oh, it's a rotten day today. And then you can, I loved listening to Christina, because it made me think of how hard we work, or how hard I work for me on the concept of self-talk. You know, what I say to myself, if I say, oh, this is a rotten day, I'm like, no, wait a minute, change that. This is the day I have, and how am I going to deal with it? Yes, yes, I slipped on the ice. I learned last night that I could take a shower with a plastic bag and get my hair washed. So, you know, you learn a lot of different things by shifting your thought from, oh, this is going to disable me forever. Nope, drive to work, haven't missed a day. So shifting from our changing our self-talk so that we can help ourselves shift. I like what you said. Instead of coming home and saying, oh, I'm tired, I'd like a beer. Boy, I'm tired, that was a long day. How can we all relax together? Good way of thinking, how we model for our family and our children what needs to happen in recovery. So do you think there are any more questions? I really want to say how much I appreciated being asked to talk, and how important it is for me. One of the things that we do in our program is we encourage people, if they're going to be in our program, detox, 30-day rehab, and then IOP, so that they have an extended time to do their recovery. One of my favorite things about the Women's World, Lori, was when we first developed it, was a 3 to 9 month program. 30 days gives people just enough time to get a little bit sober. It doesn't help them get really fully into rehab. My dad's rehab, which he was sent to my work, was 90 days. And when he came out, he said, I finally understand what religion or spirituality is. And he grew up with a Free Methodist minister, grandfather, father, and it was a rough road for him. And that was his statement. I now know what spirituality is. I know that alcohol was masking a lot for me. And it was just beautiful to see that change in him. So, and that was that 90-day rehab back in the 70s. So,
Yeah, I think the recognition for the importance of aftercare, if it's discharged from psychiatric inpatient care or residential treatment, or just coming out from surgery in a hospital. The aftercare is where there's been so much of a gap in the past, and now hopefully that's being filled in to prevent recidivism.
so aftercare and ongoing continuous care, we're always growing and learning. We are so valuable. Let's keep growing and learning.
Yeah, and I think you said IOP. Probably most people here know what that means. Intensive outpatient.
Right. Intensive outpatient, 9 hours a week of treatment. And our people are encouraged to go to meetings. And after 3 months, they go down to what we call just OP, outpatient, which is about 3 hours a week. So it's over 3 to 6 months of continuous care.
All right, so I don't see any more questions. Patty, we just can't thank you enough. Your wealth of knowledge and expert on this topic. Appreciate that. You just disclosed that you're 75 years young, and look at you, full-time clinical director, still at it, passionate about recovery and helping people move themselves forward in their recovery and giving them the tools to do that. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I really am. I'm glad I had the opportunity to do this. I was nervous. I thought, boy, and Laura, you helped me. Professional, but laid back. So it felt good. So.
All right. So what we have coming events, we'll have Mental Health Monday on the 27th, the last Monday of February, but we're really wanting to hear from those of you that are coming to this. What topics do you want? This topic was requested, and we're so grateful for Patty again. And I think we've all learned a lot from you today, and help destigmatize and understand better for ourselves and loved ones and people in our community who are experiencing alcohol issues with alcohol. But any topics you'd like to see us bring forward in the future, anyone that you'd suggest as a speaker, you can speak up right now or email Christina or me, or put something in the chat. Mental Health Monday is something that we'd like to see continue as long as we have an interest. So the other announcements would be the NAPFC, Northern Arizona Peer and Family Coalition. We continue to meet on the third Wednesday of each month from 1 to 2:30. And for NAMI Yavapai, we've got the namiyavapai.org in the chat. You can go to the website for events and Zoom links. Anything else? I think we might be giving you back a few minutes on your day here. Okay, Nadine said the family system mentioned ideas. And then Christina, thank you for putting in the email address for NAPFC. And again, upcoming topics. Send your suggestions in. Any final comments? Anything that surprised you about anything you heard today?
My research reminded me, as my age, drink more water. So
Yes, and especially in our climate here.
right.
Okay, well, I think that with that said, We'll all have a wonderful day, drink water, and take care. Thanks for being
Thank you.
here.
Thank you, Val.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye now.
everyone.
Bye.